Hope you all had a great start to 2021, as 2020, the year of the pandemic, has finally come to an end. However, the Chinese virus is not done with wreaking havoc on the world's population, at least in Western nations with their aging populations that for the likes of Italy stand at an average age of 45 against developing nations such as Pakistan with an average age of just 22 years, which at least goes some ways to explain why the COVID crisis is just not as bad as it is in the West. Though India with an average age of 26 seems to be suffering that bit more than Pakistan. So is that could be down to a weaker strain of the virus, less testing, so most patients with COVID are unrecorded, much as was the case in the West during March and April's first wave of the Chinese virus. The number of US daily COVID deaths now exceeds 4,000 as the US explodes into its fourth higher COVID peak, prompting vaccine centers to now vaccinate virtually anyone who walks through the doors, given the slow rollout of the vaccines that currently numbers just 6.2 million doses administered against a target of about 30 million. Whilst the US needs to vaccinate some 50 million people for respite from the pandemic to take effect. At the current pace of vaccinations, then the US could achieve that target by around the end of February 2021, which will be accompanied with a sharp drop in hospitalizations and deaths during March, and thus an easing to the pandemic restrictions during March. So the US could be as little as 2 months away from returning to some semblance of normality.
What happened to you?
I got maced.
You got maced?
Let place.
And what happened? You were trying to go inside the Capitol?
Yeah, I made it like a foot inside and they pushed me out and they maced me.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
Meanwhile, Trump supporters, egged on by the president, stormed the Reichstag. Democrats started their impeachment process in attempts at preventing Trump from being able to stand for office again.
In all circumstances, I ask every American to be an ambassador of Be Best, to focus on what unites us.
Excuse me. I go from winning by a lot to losing a tight race. It's corrupt.
And Twitter permanently suspends Trump as we count down to the end of the Trump politician, as the establishment effectively seeks to exclude 50% of the electorate, i.e. all those who voted for Trump, which does not bode well for social cohesion in the United States. At the end of the day, silencing Trump and hundreds of thousands of others amounts to ending freedom of speech in the United States. So it's not Trump but the Democrats who are behaving in a totalitarian manner. Trump was an amateur compared to the likes of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Democracy is dying in the US if this is the response to those one does not agree with. Another sign of the drift towards totalitarianism in the US and the UK is the silencing of all those who criticise the vaccines, i.e. the anti-vaxxers. Whilst I don't personally agree with their point of view, nevertheless they should be heard and not silenced. For instance, I recall some of my vitamin D videos being deleted by YouTube in March 2020 because they went against that which the medical establishment was spouting at the time, only for them to turn on a dime some 6 months later, which illustrate the consequences of internet censorship underway, as who knows, there could be some truth in what the anti-vaxxers are saying, which is busy being deleted by the tech giants as they goes against the wishes of Big Pharma and the politicians in their pockets. At the end of the day, the COVID crisis is just the current phase of the ongoing financial crisis that has not ended, the evidence for which is staring you in the face when you look at the balance sheets of the Federal Reserve Bank and the Bank of England, and the exponentially expanding public debt mountains. where my response to which has remained consistent, which is to leverage oneself to money printing inflation by holding assets that cannot be easily printed. I had my wake-up call following the 1987 crash that saw the Fed soon inflate stock prices back to their pre-crash highs, all whilst the perma-fools continued with their mantra of Dow is heading to the 1930s low of just 40. I hope all of you watching this are also fully awake to the consequences of the money printing inflation megatrend. Then we have the South African strain. That's another nightmare brewing out of South African strain that has 3 significant mutations compared to the London strain, which means that the vaccines are going to prove less potent against the SA strain, which I'm sure much testing is underway to quantify, but at this time my best guess is for a 50% response of the vaccines against 90% to the London strain. However, on the plus side, it appears the vaccines can be adjusted to counter the SA variant, as well as other variants that definitely will materialize over the coming months. This video was an excerpt from my latest extensive in-depth analysis that concludes in the main part in a detailed trend forecast for US house prices. However, covers many other topics including the inflation megatrend QE forever, main drivers of housing and other asset price trends, and where artificial intelligence stands going into 2021, as I believe general artificial intelligence was born during 2020, and how it will come to rule the world. Plus, Intel finally fights back against AMD's Ryzen CPUs with its latest Rocket Lake CPUs, and Alder Lake not too far ahead, maybe appearing in 2021. And of course, where the AI stocks stand at the start of 2021, all of which was first made available to patrons who support my work. So for immediate first access to all of my analysis and trend forecasts, then do consider becoming a patron by supporting my work for just $3 per month, including having access to the forthcoming schedule of analysis that includes UK house prices trend forecast, a stock market trend forecast for 2021. In fact, here's a recap of how stocks, my forecast performed for 2020. Then we have AI stocks buying levels update, Bitcoin price analysis, and of course the US dollar and British pound by roughly mid-February. That's my schedule of analysis over the coming few weeks, which you will gain first access to only for $3 per month. And ensure you subscribe to this YouTube channel for new analysis videos.